Okay, hello everybody. Let me get stuff set up. Let me just make sure everything is okay. BLT podcast, week 2 recap, week 3 predictions. And just change the title real quick for everything. Then we can begin. Okay. So let's begin with week 2 BLT in the books. It's a little bit late. Last time I did on Sunday. Today I had something to do on Monday, and week 2 ended a little bit late. I waited a little bit longer just because I wasn't sure if the mono game was going to be played. I ended up going dead game. Some surprising results, some kind of expected results. I think we saw a lot of ties. Well, we saw 2 ties this week, which were between my team and the Snoms, and I personally kind of did expect something along those lines. I would say that I was hoping to still win this week, of course, but some things happened through the middle of the season, and I was trying out new lineups, new stuff. But I'll go through that series a little bit later, and we'll start with the top series, which is the Swampbirds versus the Bolts. So the Swampbirds, the only 2-0 team left in undefeated team left now, or rather I should say 2-0 team, because there's teams that are undefeated as well who have just tied. But the Swampbirds have played well. They took care of business versus the Bolts. They beat Updated Kanto beat Tote, Frisso beat Dom 12887, which were very expected results. They were both very clean as well. TMM, I want to say before this that I apologize because I actually was mistaking 2 users in the last podcast. I addressed this in my post on Smogon, but I want to apologize to TMM, who is actually Trico my man or something like that. I don't know the exact full thing of how to spell out his entire acronym, but he actually did play very well. I would say that I would have still favored Snowfall in this matchup. So it's nice that he got this win here. And maybe I can, the more I see out of some of these players that I don't know as much about, I'll become higher on them because I haven't really seen much of him play yet. I mean, we can look at the spreadsheet here to see their overall records. So as you can see here, the Swampbirds up at the top, and then the Snorlax is following behind with the Gudras and the Hatterines. And really the big surprise here is that the only 0-2 team in the currently have been the Alakazams, and they haven't been doing so well. With myself at least putting MJ and the Alakazams as the best team. But we'll see, because he can definitely bounce back, and it's definitely not over yet for them. So you can see Havens here up at the top being very good for us, already picking up his win, actually the only win that's happened in week 3, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we can see here that there's a lot of new players. TMM going 1-1. We saw him lose against GXC and then win against Snowfall. So I think going against some of the best players so far and going 1-1 is very good. So we'll have to see where he finishes for the regular season. I think that I'll still need a few more games before I can accurately judge how good he is. But once again, apologies about the name being incorrect. Trade here winning his game, or her game rather, sorry. Trade playing very well. Not much to say. Expected result. Not Mian beating bad player. Okay, 1-3-2 was actually a very surprising result, but that wasn't enough to turn the tides of the series. Mian has played like a very solid game, and it's more to say that okay, 132 maybe didn't perform to my expectations this week. Um, Mikav playing against I'm Just Gray took care of business there. TTT beating Lightning and Bandrazzle beating Geo of 97. And I think like the thing about this week is it kind of showed that the Bolts really don't have the star power. I talked about this at the beginning of the season, but they have like a lot of weak slots. Um, they really have three good players with Snowfall, Trade, and Mikav, and the rest of their slots are very low tier for their respective tiers, and they really need to get some over performances or some players to improve throughout the throughout the season if they really want to make any noise. Which is like they may have won that first week, but really they have to play differently. Like they just don't seem strong enough across the board to be able to contest for a playoff spot right now. So we'll have to see them really make some big improvements if they want to, if they actually do want to win. Alakazams, however, have been struggling even with a relatively strong roster. I still believe that they have the pieces to win. It's just that they have to pull everything together and put together a few more good weeks. The Hatterines had a really good showing, keeping it icy, beating Twixtree in a very solid game. Ham beating Peachy Clouds was a nice comeback for him after losing the first game. And GXC also been a very strong performer. Sensei Axu had a good showing versus Mac 3. And Confide had a very good showing against Ziri. I think really the turning point of that game was really just on turn 1. If I remember correctly about that game, at least. I mean, let me pull up the replay just to make sure. But I believe that actually that exact game was decided basically because Confide led with the Scarf Goregeist. Oh wait, no, never mind. I was thinking of last week. No. This was the Rain game, and it looked like Ziri just had no matchup. It seems that Rain has always been a big threat in lower tiers because Swift Swimmers have always been down there. Like even top tier Swift Swimmers like this gen Dreadnought is up there as one of the best Swift Swimmers in the game. But because they don't have that much use outside Swift Swim, Manual Rain has always been a threat. I think Ziri probably it was like a good pick by Confide because he recognized that he probably wouldn't be able to win in a straight on fashion. So he decided to bring like a less standard team. Like Rain is kind of a little bit more of a cheesy strat, especially in lower tiers. But he did manage to pull out the win. I think that he recognized where to bring like the more cheesy quote unquote teams, and they do succeed if you're not prepared for it. And with the Ludicolo and the Dreadnought, it's independently like a pretty strong style. I don't know how much it's being played in NU because I don't like watch that much NU, but I do think that it does highlight that like Confide's ability to like prep, and that was like a good call on his part. But Ziri 0-2 now, definitely a big surprise. Jaren also 0-2, but not really a surprise he lost this game. He didn't really bring good answers to Woobat. He didn't really have many ways to win that game. And then Z-Strat's taking care of business in doubles as well. And the Hatterines put a big win on the board for them. I think this is going to be like this was a very pivotal game, like series for the Hatterines and the Alakazams. The Alakazams really need to pull their shit together now, though, because at 0-2, I still believe that if their roster does go to playoffs, they have a good chance of tying against even the best of the teams in the league, like the Swampards and stuff. And going into a tiebreaker series versus Alakazams is definitely very scary, with like a lineup of Ham, Twixtree, Ziri really being extremely powerful because Twixtree can match basically the best in OU, and then Ziri and Ham can pick two different tiers to like they can cover all the lower tiers basically, with their one weakness really being doubles, where we'll see how it goes, but I feel like this might be might be a season where the Zams don't make the playoffs if they can't put together a few more good weeks, and so the next 2 or 3 weeks really are hinging on them. Like their entire season is really hinging on the next few weeks to have like a really good performance from their teams or from the team. Where the Hatterines now with the win, they slide into, I believe they're now in 4th place overall, and that really gives them a little bit of breathing room here. They don't have to be performing every single week because, especially with the way that they ended up, like winning the game, winning the week in a very dominant fashion. That means that they get some differential so that they actually get a little bit more breathing room. Like as you can see, they have +3 here, which is much better than the +1 from the Bolts. So they'll have a little bit more breathing room to like they can still falter a few weeks, and it looks like they could end up being one of the stronger teams in the league. Even though I personally didn't have them rated very high, I think a lot of people did say that they were like a very good team. I had them basically rated at what I believe to be the 6th best team in the league, 5th outside of our team, basically. But I could very well be wrong on that one, but we'll see. They still have to put together a few more strong weeks if they want to make playoffs, but we'll see. Then my own team, the Snorlaxes, I did not play this week because I wanted to give some of our newer players a chance to play, and we did want to get kind of. I've talked about it a little bit before, but we want getting subs in early is like a very good way of both giving them time to develop, and if they don't work out, then it won't affect your season too much. So I wanted to get in some of our subs this week, and now we really only have one player who hasn't played yet. So I have like a good idea of how good all the players are. So moving forward, we'll be in a good spot. It was still a little bit disappointing to me personally that we did lose both of our OU games, but I still have a lot of faith that Reginald and Attribute can come back. Reginald had a very bad matchup in his game, and Attribute I think made a few mistakes, but overall also didn't really have a lot of ways in his game to play. I SSUU Ramolas played a very solid game, and he deservedly won that game. Fellyburn played very solid in his. Prince of All Tacos brought a little bit of a cheesy team against GW, and it worked out very well for him. The cheese paid off very well, and he won his game. Earth Gurgle lost against Plaz. Plaz played very solid. Earth Gurgle made a few mistakes, but Plaz, played solid and got his win. Cheese versus Mishimono. Cheese played very solid. He had amazing matchup. A lot of good prep. I would know because I helped him a lot this week with the prep, and we did get the win on Mishimono, who I said earlier would be one of the big challenges to beat in the doubles pool. And being able to have Cheese get that win is really good. And I feel very good about our chances in the entire pool based on how Cheese has performed so far. He's played exactly how I would want him to play, which is very solid and getting all those wins and making the correct plays while getting those wins. It's not like he's getting very he did get very lucky, but last week, but it's more like he has made the correct plays every turn, and I like that. That's what I want to see from him. And we have been getting the correct prep. Like we know what the teams are, what the enemy teams are expected to bring, and we have prepared for all the matchups. Havens also played very well versus Maroon, and he also won this week as well. So we're really rounding out to be kind of the team that I was expecting personally. I think that if we had played our full lineup, I think we probably would have won this week. But we do want, I personally do want to give other people the chance. And I want to, especially earlier in the season, and that's why we wanted to rotate some of those players in this week. Especially since our strength of schedule is mostly going to be harder on the back half and easier on the first half. So, yeah. So the Roughlights coming off a tough loss to us last week. They had a pretty good showing. They had a lot of toss-up matchups. I think Blimax losing to Deccan was tough. Prodhunt had a very good win versus Star Real. Ors Mega had a tough loss. and Arse9 actually being one of the big underperformers for this week, losing to Solar Flare RO. He brought like a very bad team in my opinion. He brought full stall. I've said before about I have like multiple opinions on stall. I think that it does do a few things. Like I think RU stall, from what I've heard from other sources, has not been very strong recently. I don't think it's like a great team to bring, and I especially don't think it's a good team to bring versus people who you don't really need to be to match up fish versus, because ultimately stall can often be very exploitable. And if you believe that you can just play solid and win any sort of matchup, then you should bring a team like Balance that can really take care of any situation. I think HO and Stall are much more matchup fishy teams, and they really require you to get like a pretty good matchup to be able to win. And Arse9 didn't get a good matchup. It seemed very impossible for him to win. Solar Flare RO, props to him for stepping up and winning, taking advantage of that matchup, right? Because before, I think Solar Flare RO, in my opinion, wasn't that type of player who, even if you gave him a winning matchup, he wouldn't be able to capitalize on it. But in recent years, he has very much improved since he was last on my team. So he could have gotten a lot better, but we'll see in coming weeks if he continues to play at that level. Skipcan had a very solid game versus Xskelly. And then Parivard won versus Raj.Shoot. Got a very nice win with the Balloon Diglett at the end, getting a very clean endgame. Raj didn't play really to his outs. He should have gone to his Poniard first, and he could have potentially taken that game. But still props to Parivard for taking that win. Shadow Monster getting a big upset over SMB. I think SMB was kind of expected, if he did go into the doubles pool, to go XO. But it does look like Shadow Monster, which, I've said before, he is a strong player. I do think that the doubles pool is maybe a little bit closer than I might have originally thought. I think SMB may not be as motivated about doubles. He may not love Sword and Shield as much. He didn't play it in doubles PL. I haven't seen him play as much Sword and Shield doubles, so he could just be not high on the tier. And Shadow Monster... basically, in my opinion, what happened was SMB led. Okay, first off, I think he brought a bad team. I don't like Arcanine in general in this tier. I believe, from what I've understand, I think SMB brought Banded Arcanine because that's what I've heard he likes to use. I think that set is terrible. I don't think it's a good Pokemon in general. And then he got really abused for using that, and then he just got destroyed. He basically led Goth. He also got a little bit unlucky with some Hydro Pump misses and stuff, but I think that in general there was still like a game to be played afterwards, and SMB basically got robbed of playing that the second half of the game, but he was probably still going to be in a losing position. I think Shadow Monster, capitalized on the fact that he got a little bit lucky, but ultimately I think that he won the game based off playing well. And I think that if SMB continues to not be able to bring the best teams, I mean, like, maybe that team is actually really good and I just didn't see it. But personally, I feel like Arcanine doesn't really do enough in the meta to actually ever consider using it. And I think that especially with the DLC coming out, and really team building is going to be a huge difference. Like, the difference between good players and bad players can be closed with team building, but the difference between great players and good players can also be gained through team building this week. And I think that going into this is really the first week of DLC. Like, the players that can best adapt to this DLC meta will be the ones who pick up the wins here. And I think that that's something that I would have valued very heavily in SMB. And we'll see. Maybe he can still pick it up. Like, I know he's not playing doubles this week, but he can still be that type of player because he has been in the past. But we'll see how that shakes out, because this week really does throw kind of a wrench in my personal doubles power rankings. It could also be a fluke, and SMB might have won that game if not for some of those Hydro misses, though. So definitely possible. But yeah, that means that the Gudras and the Rufflets tied in kind of like an up and down series. Pretty interesting one for sure. And that leads us into week 3, where There is a lot of stuff going on. So, like I said before, the only game that's happened so far, Havens versus Richard Pepper. Havens completely smashed Richard Pepper with the um, electric versus water matchup. He got like a good matchup. He played it very cleanly. There was no opening for Richard Pepper whatsoever in that game, and he just won the game straight up. But we can start at the top with the Swampers versus the Alakazams, where this was kind of like a preseason juggernaut matchup between two of the teams that coming into the season really were expected to do well. Between uh, great managers of the Welsh Wall and MJ being two guys who have been around the scene for a while, and this is going to be like probably the most interesting week um, or matchup for like most of the regular season because it's going to be a lot of great players matching up against each other. The Friso Ava versus Twixtree and Updated Kanto versus Ham are both like top tier OU matchups. It's very hard to say which one, who will go which way or whatever. But I think Friso going to, I would personally favor Friso slightly over Twixtree, and I would slightly favor Updated Kanto over Ham. But I think it's very, very close, and it's close enough to the point where it's going to be very much dependent on like the teams brought in the DLC meta, because the DLC meta is going to be so different with a lot of Pokemon that heavily affect the meta, like Volcarona, like Alakazam, like Magearna, and Azumarill even, and Urshifu, and all of those Pokemon are going to really affect how team building happens, and the people who can actually call, and like other ones like Kingdra, Mungus, etc. But like basically, my point is that it's going to be very heavily based on who is able to team build better. And I'll favor the team like if the Alakazams can put together some really good teams and they're able to do that, then they can definitely bounce back this week. It's going to be really tough though, obviously against currently the best team in the league and by record. And the Alakazams are definitely going to have a tough challenge ahead of them. I think that if they don't pull it back, it's going to be very hard though because I know personally being on some of those losing teams, it becomes really hard. Like at 0 and 2, even 0 and like 0-2 and 1 or 0 and 3, like it becomes so much harder to play the game because your teammates are less motivated. Even if you have still some motivation, like you just feel like everything is doomed. Everything has to go your way, and if you don't have a good team atmosphere, especially with I know that like Ham and MJ, they may not be in the best Mon's mindset right now because they've been getting unlucky in multiple different things. Like we got quite unlucky during the crew battle finals. And there's been other things that have been interesting them, like for example, chess. Like I just know that like in terms of mentality, it becomes so much harder to bounce back when you're like at a deficit. So that may be affecting them this week. If they do pull everything together and they're motivated because they're against the best team, because it's against the Welsh Wall, and they really need to get this week together, then they could definitely pull together something great. Tectonic Destroy versus TMM. I think that last week's performance would suggest that TMM is better, and I think that he is probably a little better. But once again, this is like a pretty close matchup, so I think it could go either way. Mac 3 versus Bloodstained. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's Valletta on Smoke or on PS. I think Mac 3 is very clearly the favorite here, and he'll be better, and I think he'll win this one. I think Ziri, if he bounces back and plays well, he should be a bad player. I think Jaren should be able to beat I'm Just Gray, and TTT will be favored against Rafua 11, like very clearly. TTT should be much better there, and Maki's Fox should be much better than Thunderbird. So it'll really be dependent on the OU match because I think it'll be what 1, 2, 3, it'll be 4-2, and if everything goes by my predictions, which obviously doesn't, but by traditional wisdom, perhaps, then the Alakazams should be leading 4-2. And if they can take one of the two OU games and the rest of their tiers go 4-2, then they'll actually be winning. And if they do beat the Swampards, it'll be a huge morale boost. I think it will really prove to everyone that the Alakazams are really a top team and that they can turn this around. And obviously, I hope the best for them. MJ is like a close friend of mine. I hope that he doesn't lose motivation for BLT because it's just worse for the entirety of the BLT scene. And I want them to take a peg off the Swampards as well. Like it would be very nice. So I hope that the Alakazams do win, and I think if they do split the OU games, that they have a good shot of winning this week. But we'll see. I think that while on paper they have always been in a good spot, they have yet to convert. So hopefully they can actually convert on some of these things, and I think that they have the players to do so though. So we'll see. Our own matchup versus the Bolts, I won't speak too much on it because obviously we are involved. But I think we should be in a good spot. Reginald should be very much favored. Attribute also very much favored. I think Kather versus Snowfall might be a little bit interesting, but Fallyburn should be very much favored. And then Principal Tacos versus Trade might be a little bit interesting, as well as myself versus Mikav, but I think Cheese is also very much favored. So in the 5 other matches, other than LC doubles other than LC, NU, and UU, we are heavily favored. So even if we do drop all 3 of those matches, which I think are actually pretty close in all 3, maybe slightly favored to the Bolts in LC, maybe slightly favored to the Bolts in UU, and maybe slightly favored to the Bolts in NU as well, but like they're all like relatively competitive. So if we do actually end up winning all 5 of the other ones, then those 3 like close quote unquote matches won't even matter. But it will really depend on us not slipping up in the other matches with already a good start in mono. So hopefully we do win. Like we could very much like actually go 8-0 if we play well and do all the things right. But I don't think that that's like really realistic as much as I just want to win this week and move on. And I think taking care of business versus the Bullets is a very important thing because some teams were not able to do that. Namely the Alakazams, but we'll see. Okay, so moving on. Or wait, actually, it wasn't was it the Alakazams? No, it wasn't. It was the Snoms. Sorry, my bad. So it is like the Snoms. It is very important to take care of the business versus the bad teams because if you do miss out, each game matters the same amount. So playing against the worst team in the league, winning against the worst team in the league is no different from winning against the 5th best team in the league or whatever. Like those wins are valued the same in the end. So it is what it is. The Hatterines versus the Rufflets, Blimax versus Dolly, Peachy Clouds. I think Blimax has had good showing so far. I think Peachy Clouds, I don't know how good he is at OU. I think his games so far haven't really suggested that he's been that good. So I'll favor Blimax slightly. I'll favor Pradhan versus Ewin slightly as well. But I think both of those matches could be very close. Alu Pariza versus GXE. I think GXE has been the best UU player by far so far, and he should take this match easily. The Ars9 versus Sensei Axio. Actually, by traditional wisdom, I would say Ars9, but actually, I believe that Sensei Axio has been playing much better in recent weeks, and I'll favor him slightly. I think Skipcan versus Confide will be definitely very interesting. They're both coming off good performances. Skipcan now 2-0, Confide with the win over Ziri. I think that NU is going to be a tier that is pretty heavily affected by some of the changes that have happened between a lot of bans, including stuff like Ndidi, which is like a tier mainstay before, and or like moving up to RU, and some other stuff like Rising Voltage and like some of these new moves. as well as some of the NFE mons. Like I think NU is definitely going to once again challenge players to build build like new teams and like adapt to the new meta, unlike some of the other stuff. Like I think UU probably changed the least so far out of all the tiers, but yeah, NU definitely is going to challenge players to do that, and I think both Confide and Skipkin have shown a good ability to do that so far. So we'll have to see how they perform this week. I think Jack in My Box is very much favored here versus Excelsior. And then Shadow Monster, I think after coming off a really good performance last week, I think we'll continue that success against Z-Strats, who I still rate Shadow Monster higher than, especially after his good performance. I think Z-Strats could definitely be a good player in the future, but or like still finish out the season very strongly. But I think that Shadow Monster should beat him here. I think the only asterisk is once again about the meta thing. I think that Shadow Monster, one of the complaints I had about him was that I wasn't sure that he would be able to adapt very well to the DLC meta. So whether or not my suspicions are true will be confirmed this week. If he does end up bringing a bad team, then Z-Strats will be able to punish that. I think he has been, he will probably bring like a solid team. I don't know if it'll be meta innovating, but I think Z-Strats will bring a solid team, and it will be probably on Shadow Monster to see whether or not he like actually does perform. And then Floss versus Dugza. Floss coming in as kind of the big ticket mono player who is, a lot of people are expecting to do very well. If he does pick up this win, it'll be huge. I think Dugza, also one of the best players, but hasn't had a good performance so far, losing week 1 and not playing last week. So if Floss does win, it will be really big. I think if Dugza loses, it will also be very big for him. So he does need to pick up a win here. So that would mean that we have, I would slightly favor the Rufflets in both OU matches, but I think it's close. And I think GXC, I would favor Sensei Axu just slightly in RU. And then I think it'll be like a toss-up in NU, and GXC should be winning in UU, and Jack in My Box in LC. I think it's close, but I'll give the edge to Shadow Monster in doubles, and I'll give the edge to Floss in mono. But definitely going to be a very close series to keep your eye on. And I think it may come down to that NU game as to see who like win, loses, or ties. And then the final matchup is the Gudras versus the Snoms. I think the Snoms have been kind of mediocre so far, and although they did tie us last week, losing to the Bolts was really bad, and I think that they do really need to pick up the pace if they want to be a playoff team. So starting off with Deckham versus Cheese, I think Deckham proved last week he played well. I think he is definitely favored here in this one. I think Tempering is slightly favored versus Little Spooks. I think Rambo Lost is very much favored. I think SMB is super favored here in versus Cificon. And I think GW is favored versus Toasted Buns, despite his good performance last week. I think Plaza is very much favored versus Parivard, and Mishimoto very much favored versus Solar Flare. And Maroon should be favored versus Gorex. I think it's kind of interesting that the Gudras decided to switch up their roster so much. We'll see how it works out for them, but I think it's a little bit risky. I think that they may be willing to take that risk because they want to be playing some of their bench players, if you will, and because they want to make sure people are on comfort. I think maybe SMB is requested to be moved out of doubles. But we'll see, because Solar Flare had a good performance last week, and moving Solar Flare outside of RU may be kind of a mistake, and they may end up regretting it, because I'm certain that he is going to get smashed by Mishimoto. And if he doesn't, it would be like very surprising to me. But we'll see. We'll see how everything shakes out this week. So just to wrap it up, I'm going to give my top 5. Once again, I'll give my top 5 matches to watch out for this week. And I think that it has to be, once again, the Fristo versus Twixtree and Updated Kanto versus Ham games. Those are going to be huge, huge games. And I also want to say, I think myself versus Mikav is also going to be a very, very good game. I think that it'll definitely be one to watch out for. I think LCA meta is definitely interesting. It kind of favors me if I'm honest. Like I think that a lot of the best mons in Gen 7 LC have already returned, and we have pretty much the same meta outside of like a few differences. Like there is no longer Core Breaker Volibee and no longer some hidden powers, but a lot of what was good in Gen 7 is coming back. So um, I think that it'll be definitely interesting to see how the Sword and Shield DLC meta goes. But I think me versus McCav will definitely be one of those big matches to watch. Um, on top of that, I also wanted to point out Skip Can versus Confide is going to be a huge one. I think it's going to be very interesting. And the last one I'll give to Shadow Monster versus Z Strats. As always, I love the doubles competition this BLT, and I think that this one is the best game this week. So I think that we have like a really, really cool week this week. I think it's a lot of close matchups, and it's going to be very interesting to see who comes out on top this week. And I think it's also, as week 3 is, a pivotal week for a lot of teams because, especially for the Alakazams, if they don't, pick up the pace, then they may not be able to make playoffs. It becomes a lot more difficult for like the Alakazams and the Snoms specifically, and also to an extent the Rufflets as well. So we'll see how everything shakes out, but that's about it for this stream. I want to thank you guys for watching. For everyone who stuck around on Twitch, the VOD will be going up on YouTube, or slash you might be watching from YouTube. But thank you guys for watching. If you are on Twitch, please leave a follow, and if you're watching on YouTube, then leave a like and subscribe. And we'll be back next week, maybe a little bit earlier in the week, maybe Monday, maybe Sunday, for the next episode. And I'll see you guys then.